Hello everyone, welcome to a new class in Object Orientation with Design Pattern. And in this opportunity, we're going to be talking about another behavioral design pattern. In this case, it is the observer pattern. Now, this is another one of those that you are already familiar with, that you have already used, but you just didn't know it was in there. So let's take a look at what it is. So the observer is really good and really useful when you want to know, when you're interested about the state of a particular object. And if you want to know if the state of that object changed or didn't change in a particular time. Well, particularly if something happened. So what is going to happen is that you're going to have a subject object and an observer object. The subject object is going to be that object that the observer is going to be paying attention to. Now, a good example of this would be, for example, when you have a blog or a client-server kind of application. So every time a new post has been posted to the blog, any observer is going to get a notification that that happened. Now, a couple of things that we need to keep in mind. From a subject point of view, the subject should know who all of the observers are. And then if something happens, or if the subject has some sort of modification and needs to notify the observers, then he will know, or it will know, who the observers are, because he will have them as an attribute internally. So it should be a list of all the possible observers that the subject has. Now, the other thing that it should have is a method to notify all of the observers. So the observer should have some sort of method that helps the observers know what has been the update in that particular instance. On the other hand, the observer should have a method to allow me to set who the subject is going to be. My observer needs to know the subject and also has to have some sort of way to be notified by the subject. Now, a good example of this is the action listener interface that we implement in Java GUI or in Java Swing. So I have a frame or an object, it doesn't necessarily have to be a frame, and I have an action listener, which is another object. Now, every time something happens in my view, my Java Swing, which is my controller, or my action listener, which is my controller, is going to be paying attention to that to see what happened. If something happened, if any a button has been clicked, or my mouse has been hovered, or anything that that can happen with a window triggers an event, then the action listener will be notified of that event and will act accordingly. So that is an excellent example of where the observer pattern have been used, and you've been using it before without being aware of the pattern itself. Now, from a class diagram point of view, we just pretty much have two objects in here. We have the subject and we have an observer. Now, I can have multiple concrete observers and I can have multiple objects as well. The important thing is that from the subject point of view, the observer, it doesn't matter how many types I have, they're all part of the same observer interface or abstraction. So I can treat them as the abstraction. Now, a little bit of good news for you. In this one, I'm not going to ask you to code. So I have provided you already with the full code of the pattern being implemented. So what we're going to do is to take a look at how it works. Now, when you go to Moodle, you will find the following classes in an Eclipse project. So you will have a class observer and subject. They're actually interfaces, and you will see the methods that the observer has to have and the subject has to have. From the blog point of view, that is going to be in the implementation of the subject interface. So my blog is a subject. The blog subscriber class is going to be an implementation of the observer interface. So the blog subscriber is an observer. And you're going to have a testing observer, which is a main method that is going to be the client class that is going to be using these two classes. So let's take a look at this. Something that I want you to keep in mind is take a look at the implementation of the methods that is inside the concrete classes. So anytime a new message is being passed, using the post message, all of the servers are requested to update to get updated using their update method. And this likewise, the subject has also methods to add and remove an observer if they're necessary. So let's take a look at that code. So let's start from the interfaces. Let's go top bottom. So from the observer point of view, the observer point of view has only two methods: a method to update, to being able to get any update from the subject, and a method subject, so I can define who my subject is for this particular guy. So let's have a look at the subject class. In the subject class, it's a little bit more complex. I have 4 methods, but 2 of them are only to register or unregister a new observer. So as I said before, my observer needs to know who the subject is, and my subject needs to know who their observer is. Now I have 2 methods. One of them is the get update that allows me to do a new update in the blog or in the subject, so the observer can be notified. And I have another method, which is the notify observer. That is the one that is going to tell all the observers that something has happened. Now let's have a look at the concrete classes. Let's start from the blog. In the blog, I have an empty constructor and in my a default constructor, a constructor with no parameter, and internally that is just creating a new instance of an array list. Now that is going to be my observers. I also have a message, a string, which is a message, and I also have a boolean that defines whether there has been any changes in the blog or not. Now let's take a look at the different methods. So my register method allows me to receive a new observer and to contain it in the observer method. Now I have a few validations. So if that object is null, then I'm throwing a null pointer exception. And if that object is already contained in the list, in the collection, then I'm not adding it. It's only being added if it's not there already. This is something that can be avoided using a set instead of a list, but up to you guys if you want to change that. Now from the onRegister point of view, exactly the same principle. I receive an observer that I want to unregister, so I just need to remove it from the collection. Now let's have a look at what happens when I want to notify the observers. So if I want to notify the observers, well, the first thing I need to do is I need to get a copy of all the observers that I have. So that's why I'm creating there a list that I'm calling observers locals. So that list is coming from the attributes that I have at the top. Now, a couple of things in here. If I'm notifying my observers, I'm going to define my change to false. We'll see when it goes to true, but I'm going to say it's false at the moment. And then I'm going to go with each one of my observers that I have in that list. I'm going to go each one of them, and from them, I'm going to call the method update. Now, something that I'm doing at the top of the method before I do anything else, if I don't have any change, then I stop the method. There is no point notifying the observers if there is nothing to notify. So I'm saying if not change, then return, killing the method and not doing anything else. Now, if it has been changed, then that just means that I actually have to go with each one of the elements that I have in the collection and call the update method on the observer side. Now, there is a method called getUpdate. What this getUpdate method is going to do is to actually return the message that has been updated or the message that has been saved. Now, I have one final method that I added in here, which is the post message method. Now, the post message method is going to receive a message, which is a string. It's going to print out, yes, a new message has been posted. It's going to put that message inside the attribute. It's going to put that message inside the variable that I have declared at the top of the class. And then I'm going to say, hey, there is something to notify. This is my flag saying, yes, there is a change. Change is equals to true. Now, once the post has been done and I've defined that there is true and I have also defined what my message is, then I can call the method notify observers. So the method notify observers, as we saw before, is going to check all the conditions, and if everything is correct, is going to go to the observers and call the update method from them. Now let's take a look at those observers. Let's take a look at that update method on their side. Well, first of all, one of my attributes is my subject. So every object, not only the subject has to know who the observers are, but also each observer has to know who is the subject, who is the subject that I'm following. And the other thing that I define in here is just a name, just to being able to identify each one of my observers. So I just define a name in there. Now, from the inheritance from the interface decides or defines that I need to have an update method. Now, that is the method that the subject is calling when it is updated, when there is something new to report. So if that is the case, that means that I need to, well, first of all, I should go to the blog, which is whoever my subject is, and get the update. Now, if my update is a new message, I say, there is nothing to report. So if I get a null as a message saying, no, there is nothing new. But if I come with something, I can just print that to the console saying, yeah, consuming message, this. Okay. Now, the only other thing that I have in there is just a setter to define who the subject is for this particular object. Now, let's take a look at the main class. So I'm creating a new blog, and I'm creating 3 subscribers that I have called object 1, object 2, and object 3. Now, once I have defined those 3 guys, I need to let the subject know who the subscribers are, or I need to let the subject knows who the observers are. So I'm saying blog that registers subscriber 1, 2, and 3. This way, the blog now knows who is the subscriber or who is the 3 observers. But I need to do the same thing on the other side of things. For each one of my subscribers, I need to say the subject is the object blog, so they can know how to talk to each other. So if I want to check if there is any method, I can call from any of the objects, from any of the observers, I can call the method of update. We'll see in a second what we get. And then I can do some post to say, I don't know, for example, steak for dinner, or here we go. So the post happened from the blog point of view. So let's run this code to see what this does. There it is. So this fair line here, that when it's calling the update, my object 1 is saying, yeah, I'm actually calling that method from the subscriber 1. So my object 1 is saying there is nothing new. I'm not doing anything. So, but when I post a new method, the subject itself posted saying, yes, message posted to the blog, steak for dinner. And then my 3 objects have been notified of this particular change. If there was something new in the message, my 3 objects they know what to do. When I do another post, same story, my 3 objects have been notified to get the update. So this is a great tool that we've been using again, and that you can use in any other situation, as long as you have a situation where there is an object that needs to be followed by some other objects that want to get notified every time something happens. Now let's take a look at some of these implications. So one of the good things is that you can introduce new observer classes without having to change the subject code. Because if you add more observers, all you need to do is to implement the observer interface. So if you implement the observer interface, the subject code doesn't care, because it's going to treat all of the observers as the interface, not as the concrete classes. Now you can also introduce new subject classes without having to change the observer. Same story. you can implement the subject class, and then the observers will treat them just as a subject. It doesn't matter that it's a different implementation. Now, you can establish the relationship between these objects at running time, and that's something that is really good as well. At running time, these instances can be created, and you can use inputs from a database or a text file or the user, and then you can establish these relationships as needed. And also, in most of the cases, subscribers are notified in random order. That also depends on your implementation, but there is no guarantee, well, unless you actually code it, that all of the subscribers are going to be notified at the same time. Okay, guys, thank you very much for watching this video. I hope you like it and that it was useful. And if you have any questions, please let me know in the live class. I'll see you in the next one.